So Putin calling on his, quote, neighbors in Ukraine not to exacerbate the war there, which he started, and Secretary of State Antony Blinken repeating a warning that we also heard from NATO that things are probably, as Benjamin also described, about to get much worse.
We say it is likely to get worse. It's unfortunately based on everything we know about President Putin's methods when it comes to seeking to subjugate another country to his will.
And with that, let's bring in Pentagon Press Secretary John Kirby. John, great to have you with us today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
We're hearing from our reporters on the ground of essentially a significant escalation, and we have heard Antony Blinken talk about that. We know Macron said that that was what was coming after his 90-minute conversation with Putin yesterday. So I guess my first question is, how does that change the calculus and the plan at the Pentagon?
Well, it's making it very clear that we have to continue to provide security assistance to the Ukrainian armed forces, and we're doing that, quite frankly, as fast as we can. I mean, we have sent in almost all of the $350 million that the president just authorized about a week ago. It's almost all there, and we're looking for ways to accelerate that. So speed is an issue here as we see the Russians ramp up their attacks and their bombardment of major city centers. We're trying to get more stuff there, and we're also taking a real hard look at how we're bolstering the NATO alliance and making sure that we've got what we need in place there to protect NATO territory. The other thing here, Martha, that we just did in the last couple of days was set up a deconfliction channel between the U.S. military and the Russian military. It's all based in Europe, so that we can have more operationally focused and more direct communications with the Russian military in near real time so that we can avoid the risks of miscalculations.
So do you feel confident that that will work that way? That's the hotline that we mentioned moments ago. Do you have confidence that the Russians are going to deal honestly on that hotline?
I mean, it's not about trusting whether they're honest. It's just making sure that we've got a communication line set up, and they have acknowledged the line. We have tested it with them, and they tested it too. So we know that they know it's there, and we know that they know it's working. And we just hope that they will participate in a direct and forthright way. Again, this really isn't. It's not about coordination. It's just about making sure we have a way to communicate if things get raised to a level where we feel like some sort of measure of deconfliction is necessary, and if we're trying to reduce the risk of an incident or a miscalculation.
Was that prompted by Putin's talk about the potential of putting his nuclear weapons at higher alert?
No, I think the real precipitating thing for us with respect to this deconfliction channel, and it's not unusual, we have one in Syria with the Russians, we do this elsewhere around the world, was really the degree to which Ukrainian airspace became contested over the last several days. The Ukrainians are flying their aircraft, they're launching missiles, they're defending themselves, but the Russians have aircraft and missile systems as well inside Ukrainian airspace. Most of the airstrikes that we're seeing on these population centers are actually being launched from inside Ukraine. And so that buttresses right up against the airspace of NATO nations, particularly on NATO's eastern flank. And that really was what made us feel that this was the right thing to do. A deconfliction channel was important for that purpose.
John, are you encountering any difficulties in getting American military weapons into Ukraine that have been promised to them? How are those channels going?
Well, it's actually working quite well. Without getting into detail, we don't want to put too much information out there in public. We know that the material we're sending, and it's not just us, 14 other nations are also sending material. We know that it's getting into the hands of the Ukrainian armed forces. Secretary Austin spoke just a couple of days ago with his Ukrainian counterpart, the Minister of Defense, Reznikov, and the minister made it clear he was very grateful for that support and made it clear that it was, in fact, getting into the right hands and being used.
Does the Pentagon have numbers on how many Russian soldiers have been killed in this battle so far? They're saying somewhere just south of 500. Is that number accurate?
We have seen a lot of ranges here. It's very difficult to know with great specificity exactly what the toll is in terms of killed and wounded by the Russians. We're trying to stay away from estimates here at the Pentagon because we're not on the ground. We don't have perfect visibility. What we can tell you, though, with certainty is we do know that the Russians have experienced casualties. They have suffered soldiers killed. They have suffered soldiers wounded. We know that this fight is taking a toll on them. The Ukrainians have been very brave on the battlefield and very strongly defending their country.
Would you say 500 is a low number and that it's well north of that? Is that accurate to say?
Yeah. I'm going to stay away from ranges. I really don't want to get into estimating on that. We do know that they have taken casualties, though.
Okay. I just spoke with the former NATO Supreme Allied Commander, General Breedlove, and we talked about what the Pentagon's mission is exactly in Ukraine. Sure. And here's what he brought up with regard to that.
It's a very good question to ask. I mean, are we going to try to manage the fall of Ukraine, or are we going to try to avoid the fall of Ukraine? And I think these are tough questions that we have to ask ourselves.
Can you answer that question?
I'll tell you very clearly what the Pentagon and the Department of Defense is focused on, and it's really two things, Martha. One is continuing to make sure that Ukraine can defend itself. And they are defending themselves. And as we just talked about a few minutes ago, we're helping them do that, and we're trying to do that as fast as possible. Number two, making sure that NATO can defend itself. And that's why the president has ordered additional troops over to Europe. That's why we've repositioned troops inside Europe to elsewhere on NATO's eastern flank. We're making sure that we can make positive that we can defend NATO territory, that we're making it clear to Mr. Putin and to our allies how seriously we take our Article 5 commitments under the NATO treaty.
But I guess what does success look like? Is our mission to make sure that Putin does not take over Ukraine?
Our mission is to make sure Ukraine can continue to defend itself. And look, Mr. Putin has a lot of options available to him. We've all seen the military options that he so recklessly is willing to use against the Ukrainian people, people who pose no threat to him or to the Russian people. The other option he has available to him is diplomacy. He could de-escalate this right now. This is a war of his choice. He has put himself in this position. He's responsible for the death and the destruction that he's causing. He could end it today by sitting down with the Ukrainians and finding a diplomatic path forward here, de-escalating by taking his troops out of the country and stopping this invasion that he is responsible for.
But that, is that, I just want to go at this one more time. So what does success look like? Does success, because what Ukraine would say, what President Zelensky has said is, we're the front line here. So if you care about protecting NATO, you have to make sure that Putin does not achieve his goal of taking over and dominating Ukraine.
Success looks like an invasion that is stopped and reversed and de-escalated. That's what success looks like here. Success is a free and independent, sovereign Ukraine, which it is now and was before this invasion. That's obviously Mr. Putin's goal. That's success. That's success, the freedom for the Ukrainian people to choose their own futures. We're going to help them defend themselves in their country. We're also going to make sure that Mr. Putin knows any attack on NATO is going to be considered an attack on all of NATO, and we're going to respond very, very aggressively.
One last question for you, John, if I may. What does the time frame look like at this point? I know the president has said this could go on a long time. Do you believe that's the case, and how long is a long time?
I think the president's right that this could potentially drag out for weeks, maybe months. We don't really know what Mr. Putin's next step is going to be. He is clearly, and his commanders are clearly, frustrated and flummoxed by the fact that here we are on day 9 and they have not achieved all the goals that they wanted to achieve by now. They really haven't taken any major population centers, save one. And so they're going to readjust. They're going to try to overcome those challenges. And our concern is that they're going to do it with even more brutality than they already have visited upon the Ukrainian people. And the Ukrainian people are clearly in the fight and ready to defend themselves. And that defense that they're putting up has slowed Mr. Putin's progress. So the president is 100% right. This could drag on longer than anybody might have thought. But, it's a credit to the Ukrainian people that they are, in fact, so courageously defending their territory and their fellow citizens.
Yeah, it's an extraordinary story on their part. One last one I'm going to sneak in here. Would you still describe the advance on Kyiv from the north as stalled?
Yes, we would.
Okay. John Kirby, thank you very much, sir. Always good to have you with us.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.